Okay, sweet. So, hey, what's happening, Sean? Looks like we're talking about WandaVision today.
Yes, this last Friday we just had the finale.
And well, before we get into the finale, what do you think about the show as a whole? Let's cover the whole experience here.
Oh yeah, for sure. Overall, I really like it. I think that it's definitely a really big step in like the creative direction for Marvel to hopefully let creators get more creative freedom on these Marvel Disney Plus shows, and I think it's a really great example of when you're able to take a gigantic budget and just give someone free reign to kind of do what they want to do with it. And not the entire thing works for me, but a lot of it works enough for me to love it overall as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. It's very it started off as being like I already made a video called like why WandaVision is the best thing to come out of the MCU. It started off like knocking it out of the park for me, but with the whole thing, I can now say that at least it was a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
There's something it makes me think of. There's this idea with Christopher Nolan that he basically had to earn these like one for me, one for you kind of movies. So what he
Yeah.
would do is he would make like The Prestige, and or he made Batman Begins, and because he did, and it was already like a known property, they trusted him with that money a little bit more. And once he proved he could make a bunch of money with that movie, then they let him do The Prestige. And then he had to do another one, and he does The Dark Knight. And then after he does The Dark Knight, he gets to go on and do Inception. So it's, and then you could theoretically argue that Dark Knight Rises gave him Tenet later on, but he's done a handful in between, so it doesn't really count.
Yeah, he's been able to really create that kind of idea. And I think that's like kind of a great example. Someone that I also see doing that a lot recently would be Taika Waititi, because he would kind of was able to get the do one, make one for them, make one for you. So that he did Thor Ragnarok, and then that enabled him to get a $40 million budget to be able to make Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, right. Great example. So the reason I bring this up is it kind of reminds me of WandaVision. It feels like they front loaded the show with the really creative stuff, but then it's like the reason that they were allowed to do that is because the producers knew that eventually it kind of turns into standard fare.
Yeah, the way that I kind of see it is it feels as if the first, I'd say, 5 episodes of the show feel like they kind of were able to do whatever they wanted. It felt like there was a very clear, concise vision. I didn't mean to make a pun
Yeah.
there, but there's a very clear and concise vision there, and it feels like a singular voice coming from a single group of people who are very passionate. And
Right.
then
Absolutely agree.
as the show goes on, I'd even say 6 and 7, and even most of 8 for me still felt as if there was definitely some of that there, but it started to feel as if certain things were being sprinkled in where it felt as if they were starting to kind of Marvelify things or start to kind of get more producer ideas in there, because it feels as if every Marvel thing at some point kind of has to get to a certain point, and that happens in even a lot of their better movies where you'll really get it starts to feel like the last third of the film is more detached from the first two-thirds.
Well, and in becoming more detached from the first two thirds, it's becoming more attached to the overall MCU.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that's what ended up being its biggest problem for me by the end of it, is that such a show that really felt like it was doing so many things in an original way and in such a unique way of just how it was presenting these things. By the end of it, it ended up kind of turning into gigantic CGI fight
Uh-huh.
between people in the sky with punching and throwing and buildings
Uh-huh. Shooting
exploding.
fireballs at each other, and yep, exactly
And
right.
for me at
Standard
least,
Marvel fare.
yeah, and for me at least, I was totally fucking into it until episode 8, where everything slowly started to fall apart the second that Agatha Harkness became the kind of villain character. Because I really loved the Agatha all along song. I thought that was great.
Oh,
I
so
thought
great.
that was
Oh
a
yeah.
really, really entertaining song, and I was like, okay, this is not a bad reveal at all. But
Yeah, I'm gonna
then,
request that at every party.
yeah, it's such a great song. And then I slowly realized Catherine Hahn is a great comedic actress, but she is not a good, intimidating person. Therefore, the fact that she's now playing the main villain of the show, every line of dialogue out of her mouth sounds laughable.
Well, here's what's hard too, though, is I think that the dialogue in a vacuum is relatively laughable. You know, especially like that Rita Repulsa, you know, ending of episode 8 where she's got the kids with the leashes around their necks, and
That
it
felt
just
like a
turns straight
Disney
up.
Channel original movie, kind of. It felt
1000%. If you grew up in the fucking 90s or the early 2000s, like you've seen this stuff before in like Disney Channel, right? They
yeah,
don't
it
have the
felt
budget.
very, very stupid.
And the problem is, like, I'm not even ready to blame Catherine Hahn yet. Like, yes, she's there and she's not blowing my mind, but I'm like, I don't know if I had that dialogue, how I would be able to pull that off either. It's just so kind of goofy that I think with better direction of what that character was supposed to be, I think there's a possibility that she was doing what they wanted, but I think what they wanted was dumb. Same problem I have with the Darcy character. Darcy took me out of the show often. She was the one who like really reminded me that I was watching a TV show most of the time.
Yeah.
They gave her a lot of the stupid kind of, it's a lot of the same problems that like you'll hear Dan Harmon complain about in like sitcoms. Is like too many like self-referential jokes, too many like quips. The person's like impossibly, it's kind of the Josh Whedon problem too, where like his characters are often impossibly snarky. It's like Brad Pitt was talking about the script with Quentin Tarantino and how he writes characters, and he's like, the way he writes characters is like when you get in an argument with someone and then on your ride home you 20 minutes later think of a perfect comeback, those characters always have those in their back pocket at all times. And it's fun in a comedy, you know, but it's rough because the WandaVision thing, and the MCU suffers from this all the time. All of their stuff is basically action adventures with heavy comedic elements. You could like, almost all of them are almost half comedies, half action adventures.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which is a difficult genre to make deep, thoughtful, interesting, you know, kind of plot lines and stakes that you care about. A lot of times it kind of takes the wind out of the sails.
Yeah, most definitely.
And that's why, right? So you end up with that's why like Thor Ragnarok is, I think, one of the better ones, you know, versus, you know, or Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that. But even Guardians has these kinds of problems because they do try to take a lot of things real seriously.
And that's a great example, that where it feels very much so like you're kind of flipping a switch a little bit.
Right. And so WandaVision in the first handful of episodes, like it really let you, like, it's doing this comedy thing, but it's this very black comedy, whereas the whole time you're like, man, this is stressful. And if things are how I think they are, this is actually really dark. And so speaking of that, I mean, it's unbelievably dark that Wanda, because of her grief, has like been torturing all of these people. Like that is really heavy and dark subject matter. Yeah. And then I feel like the last couple of episodes just kind of make it into not so big of a deal. You know, it's like, well, you know, one thing that frustrated me is that by the end of the last episode, Marvel is telling you, you know, the vision of the storytelling, the language of the storytelling is telling you that we should forgive her. And, you know, Rambo tells her, problem. It is. That's what I'm saying. Like Rambo tells her, like, they'll never know what you sacrificed. Screw what you sacrificed. You shouldn't have had it in the first place. Like, you got it on the backs of torturing all of these people. No, I'm not going to forgive you. None of these people in this town should forgive you. And I personally don't forgive you. I think you're a straight up supervillain that needs punishment. I think the only way to end that, where Wanda doesn't come across looking like a horrible villain, is to have her turn herself in and be like, hey, I need to, like, pay penance. But she just goes, all right, see ya, and bounces. And it's like, no, screw you. Like, someone should go chase her down and make her pay for what she's done. It's horrible.
And I think that there's been a very, very large kind of backlash I've seen online a lot from how the show ended. And a lot of the time when I see, a great example would be, I guess, spoilers for Iron Man 3, the reveal that the Mandarin is actually an actor. That's an example where,
Trevor.
Yeah, everyone ended up, like, it's kind of known now as, like, one of, like, the worst plot twists ever. And I'm like, I did not mind it. I thought it worked. I thought it was a nice little subversion, but everyone lost their mind.
I lost my mind. No, here's why I lost my mind, though. The thing is I don't think I would have cared if I didn't fall in love with the Mandarin they had set up.
And I thought
making the Mandarin Osama bin Laden was incredible. I thought it was super ballsy, which then explains, like, the reason they were allowed to be ballsy in that moment is because they told the producers that they were going to subvert it anyway. He wasn't really going to be Osama bin Laden. Yeah. But that was such an unbelievably cool take on that, especially for a character that I thought sucked. And so in the comics. And so it's like, oh, you got Iron Man and one of his main villains is like literally like some Asian magician. Like, that's stupid. But I was like, how are they going to do the Mandarin? And the way they did him and those 3 little clips of his, like, lessons to learn and blah, blah, blah. Like, I thought that stuff was incredible. So that's why it sucked when I was like, oh, no, you finally made a villain that I really like and care about. And then he said, oh, never mind. He's just Trevor.
And I understand
so I assume the reason
I feel like,
I assume the reason you're bringing up Trevor is because of Ralph Boner.
That's one of the big things. And I think even more than that, I mean, that was a great example where it really felt as if I feel as if some of the emotional punch of especially episode 6, when we are getting to talk like when we have Wanda and Pietro kind of just talking about like what's happening with Wanda, those moments almost retroactively get downgraded simply because of what it's doing in that moment afterwards. And I think even that goes to bigger parts of the show overall. Is you have a show that on one end wants to really explore this grief and loss, but then in the last episode of your show, you transfer Vision's consciousness into another Vision, and he's just going to be back again.
Oh, yeah, it's a Disney death. It is a straight up. I made a video a long time ago talking about what I called Iron Gianting. And the Iron Giant was the first movie I saw that made me feel like a cheap death had happened. It was like I was finally old, and I was like 9 years old, so I was finally old enough to go, wait a second, like you had me crying a minute ago and now he's just back? Well, what the hell? Like that feels really cheap.
It feels
and
very,
so from
very
then
cheap.
on, every time I see it happen, I'm always like, oh, Iron Giant again, here he is. And so that's exactly what kind of felt like with Vision. As soon as they started establishing that there was any possibility that he actually like makes it out of the hex, I was like, oh God, okay. So you guys got to have this big like, oh no, we killed Vision in Endgame, but you're just gonna undo it. So it retroactively poops on it, you know?
It really, really messes it up.
Yeah, it's the same feeling I had when like, Barbossa comes back in the sequel. It was like his death is probably one of my all-time favorite villain deaths ever. And the entire movie is this like bull to hold this thing. It's not some like thing that just happens. Like the entire movie is setting it up. Jack has been carrying this bullet for 10 years just for one guy. He has plenty of points in the movie where if he just shot somebody with that bullet, it would have made his life a lot easier, but he's holding it and then he finally gets to use it on this guy. Which also kind of closes out his arc of like, he finally can feel something for the first time, and it's him dying. Like that's all beautiful, and then you just poop on it when you're like, oh, never mind, he's back, it's cool. Well,
that happens a lot in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general.
Oh, absolutely. I think Avengers 1, Iron Man.
Oh, absolutely. And I think
he's calling Pepper Potts. I'm over there crying in the theater, and then it's like, oh, never mind, I'm fine. It's like, God damn it.
And they can't help themselves. And I think another great example of that would come in with this is actually like a double-sided example. So you have one, like, and I don't even like this movie much at all, but the ending of Captain America: The First Avenger, I really love. I love the whole like I had a date, like, because it's like, okay, I've come back and everyone I know is dead. But then you go to the Winter Soldier and Peggy's still alive. And I'm like, he's like, he really wants to get with like this gilf, like he wants to get with this old dementia-ridden an old woman now, which is like really fucking creepy. And then in Civil War, he's like, I guess I'll fuck their niece now as well, like. And it's like, okay,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's
it just
great.
Undoes all that tension, which it would have been so much better to just sit with the tension, which I'm actually glad you brought this up, because this also ties into something that I think is important for WandaVision, which was that the ultimate baddie, I still really think, should have just been Wanda's grief.
Absolutely.
And I think they tried to lean in a little too hard that like, oh, Agatha is really the big bad. And it's like, no, it's just the grief. Like that's the thing. And Agatha should have been treated a little bit more as just someone who is trying to take advantage and like gain her power. And not to say that they didn't do that, but I feel like the language of the story tried really hard to make it seem like, no, the real everything would have been fine, but Agatha is really kind of this bad, influence who's, making these bad things happen. And she's kind of puppet stringing things. And, it's just, I would have liked to not have had an Agatha character at all.
Oh, agreed. And I think another huge problem comes in with episode 8, especially when I personally love like 80% of the episode. I think that the flashbacks, other than the very first one with the kind of annoying child acting where it's like both of my parents have now been killed and I'm just like sitting here not really reacting that much to just seeing like everything fall apart. Like, other than that, like, and I still like
what they're trying to do.
I still like the context of that scene. I like what they're trying to set up. I really do.
Yeah.
And the rest of the flashbacks I really enjoy. But I think that there is a problem where you really start to undercut that by every time you have an actually good emotional moment, it's undercut by Agatha coming back in and just explaining the exact thing we're supposed to get from that scene to back to Wanda in a snarky tone, which is like, this feels so Disneyfied. It's like...
Yep, absolutely right. Yeah, like I said, it feels like a trade-off. It was like, hey, look, we'll give you guys the first half of the season to do all the David Lynchian experimental crap you want to do, but we get the second half, and so here's the things you have to force in, here's the things you have to fit in. And honestly, most of the time, I was already having that issue even starting in, I think, episode 4, where it's like most of the time we spend in the real world. Let me put it this way. So a lot of the stuff works in WandaVision within the world of WandaVision.
Exactly.
Because it's a television show, and I know this, right? And so conveniences and all that kind of stuff, these are all tropey things that happen in a TV show. The problem is that the real world, I felt like didn't sell real world enough, and it looks so much like the other MCU movies that it feels like a show within just another show. So the stuff that they're trying to present to me as real world doesn't feel like the real world. It just kind of feels like I switched channels. Like this is just a different TV show I'm watching. That's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
That's the problem.
So that was a tough one for me.
The problem, that's the thing, is the first 3 episodes for me are like pretty much perfect in my opinion.
Probably the best for me.
They're my favorites.
Yeah.
And
they're probably my favorites too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I think that's the biggest problem is as the show becomes less in line with the TV homage aspect, the farther away it gets from what it was originally trying to be and closer to what Marvel wants it to be.
And where their best stuff was coming from. They all but abandoned it. In the last 2 episodes, we spend a lot of time in WandaVision, but it's not WandaVision anymore. It's just the real world, basically. Like, they kind of just ignore all the TV tropes and everything like that, which is fair because in theory, I guess Wanda was making those things happen. I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that on a writing point, they've killed the best part of the show, and then they try to get a lot of mileage out of the good feelings that they garnered from you earlier.
And I think another huge problem is that because of the way that Marvel feels the need to really kind of overload certain things, it feels as if something that probably would have made the episodes feel a bit more cohesive at the end really kind of fell off especially because I was kind of listening to some interviews after finishing it, and I found out that there was an entire sequence cut where Darcy, Monica, and Ralph all meet up with the kids, and they're in Agatha's house, and they think that maybe they should steal the Darkhold from the basement because the kids had seen it when they were being held hostage. Mm-hmm. And then when they reach out to get the book, the rabbit hops up in front of the book, and it's like, oh, it's Senior Scratchy, and then they kind of realize that it's kind of like this whole like American Werewolf in London kind of thing, where the rabbit turns into this big demon. And the whole reason it got cut is because they could not finish all the visual effects work for it.
Where did you hear this? Because that's really interesting. Because one of my big theories, and lots of people's big theories, was that Mephisto would be heavily connected into this. And the cat, or the bunny who meows like a cat, is called Senior Scratchy, with which Mr. Scratch has been a nickname for Satan for a really long time.
Yeah.
And also, the first introduction of Mephisto into the Marvel Universe was him showing up as a fly. And they have that scene in episode 8, I think. No, episode 7, I think, where Wanda is looking at the window or whatever, and she sees this fly, or this like cockroach-looking thing. So all of those, to me, feel like nods to him becoming Mephisto. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like they actually were going to go through and do it, but then they cut it.
Yeah, so where I saw this is on slashfilm.com, there was an interview with the director, Max Shackman, where he kind of was revealing that the finale had larger roles for everything that was happening. And it kind of feels a lot to me as if certain things were set up in a way where it feels as if they started writing certain plot lines and then Marvel came in and told them they couldn't do it. Like, another great example is when Monica says, like, I know a great aerospace engineer that would be up for this task. And everyone's like, oh, this has to be Reed Richards. And then it's just some random guy. It's like, it kind of feels as if they're teasing into it a little too hard with like their trolling, like especially with the Ralph Boner segment. It feels a lot like it starts to also question certain things where it's like, so Agatha Harkness was just Pietro and was also doing all of and was also has all the same powers as Quicksilver because like of the witch ability she has, and it's like,
see, that's the problem I have, is that why can she make him a speedster?
Yeah, like,
can she make like a clone of Wolverine who's a healer?
Things start to really fall apart when you think about those kind of things, because it starts to feel a lot like, because as I kind of was seeing in a lot of interviews, it kind of seemed as if Marvel kind of was telling them behind the scenes what characters from Marvel they could and couldn't have in the show. And so because of that, it kind of feels as if you get certain characters that in certain ways, like I can understand, especially like I can understand Rambo being there, and I can understand Wu kind of as well, but it's like it starts to feel like they're starting to almost take from like the bargain bin of characters when you have like Darcy, the comedic relief that everyone hated from Thor to the Dark World, like
Oh, totally.
it starts to feel as if they're kind of grasping at straws to find connections to the MCU when it does kind of feel as if the creators were kind of looking for something a bit different, but at some point down the line, there was a
It has to all connect.
there had to be a connection, and there also had to be a compromise.
Well, it's one of the issues I've had with Marvel in general versus what DC is kind of starting to kind of do. Zack Snyder aside, is like, I think the value that DC is starting to tap into is that if they just make a movie like Joker and then they just make a movie like Shazam and they have no intention of connecting them, then they're not shackled by anything. They can just try to make the best Shazam and the best Joker that they can. But when every property in the MCU has to be connected, eventually you run into these issues where if you're like, hey, what if we made like a psychological horror and we made it WandaVision? And they're like, okay, great. Just make sure that by the end, it feels just like the rest of the fucking properties. And it's like, well, dude, you're really tying my legs together, man. Like it's tough.
And I think another really big problem comes in with the idea that there's certain things that are being set up, especially in the first post-credit scene, where the next, I believe, other than the Eternals, the next like 2 films in the MCU are Spider-Man 3 and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where this is kind of exactly where you would want these sort of things to start tying in, because Wanda is the main character of the Multiverse of Madness alongside Doctor Strange, and the two of them are traveling through the multiverse together. And it's the kind of thing where, especially if you leave off on certain things, especially with how that second post-credit scene goes, and it's like she hears her kids, who earlier in the show are said to be real, and then they die anyway, I guess, because they weren't real, but then at the end they are real or something. Like, there's a
she
lot
also
of,
hilariously like leaves them up in their bedroom to die alone.
which is that's kind of ridiculous, and it's like, and that's the whole
so
other
funny.
problem where you get into where they really want that cheat death. They want the problem that Soul had, where it's like you want the big emotional payoff, but you also want to retcon it right after the people have the emotional response to it, because you don't actually want to have consequences.
Yeah, and it's not even just the MCU. I mean, Star Wars does this, right? It's like in Rise of Skywalker, they're like, oh no, we killed Chewie. And like what? The literal next scene is like, no, don't be scared. Stop crying. He's alive.
And that happens in,
like,
there's so many, I would have kind of loved if the end of Rise of Skywalker just had like 20 more minutes of them just like resurrecting each other by kissing, and then each one just keeps dying over and over again.
Until someone else comes and...
Yeah. Because it's like, also, it really feels like they just can't help themselves.
Or don't bring him back that much. Like, just bring him back enough that you can get him to a hospital, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But then it also happens with C-3PO. They're like, hey, what are you looking at, bro? And he's like, oh, just getting one last look at my friends. And then bam, he's back.
And that's like the best scene of the movie for me, and then he comes back anyway.
And that's the thing, is that it's like, look, like, I would maybe give a crap about your story if I felt like there was any stakes, but there's just no stakes, you know? The only guy who dies is the person who has it coming. You know,
and like, it's even like, and you even start to like look at like, just like, I don't want to like get off on this for too long, but like you even start looking at like, okay, so you release The Last Jedi, and then Leia dies kind of, and then she comes and then she pulls herself through space up to the thing, and it's like, okay, this would be like the perfect time for her to die, because because the actress is dead, but then you have to bring back a CGI monstrosity that costs like $50 million in the next episode.
Yeah, but they didn't know, I guess. But no, I mean, I agree. So yeah, it's the issue that like Marvel in general has a stakes problem. I think that even teenagers are watching things and seeing guys like get into peril where they look like they're going to die and they roll their eyes, you know, and they know that the other issue that they have is there's also like an information problem. Like, we know what the next 30 movies are going to be. You know, someone brought up a good point about, I just watched Chaos Walking, and like the whole plot is like, oh, there's no women, or like, well, I can Google the cast list and here's a whole bunch of women. So like Marvel has that same problem of like, oh, so-and-so is going to die. No, he's not. There's 3 more movies that he's the named character of.
Like,
he's
like
definitely
a
not
Black
gonna die.
Panther. Like, they really want us to believe that Black Panther is dead for like 15 minutes of the movie, but we've already seen him in the trailer for Avengers Infinity War.
Uh-huh. Well, and you've also seen, like, in the trailer, they show, like, the final fight, I think, you know? Like,
Yeah,
or parts of it.
they
the
do.
PlayStation 2 graphics.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about that film is, like, that film kind of reminds me a lot of something that happened with Wonder Woman, is both of those films seemed to have a decent ending in play, and then with Black Panther, 6 weeks before the film's supposed to be released, they decide that they want a gigantic final CGI battle, and then because that same visual effects house is also working on Infinity War at the same time, they have essentially
like the second unit.
Yeah, they have essentially 4 weeks to finish this absolutely gigantic final battle, and so it, of course, and then they just up the motion blur. And then it just...
Well, and I don't know if... yeah, exactly, right. And I don't know if it's true, but it feels like that happened in BVS, too. Like, Batman versus Superman, they have this It's literally called Batman versus Superman. The best fight in the movie is against Batman and Superman.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but that's not an epic enough fight. We need some huge thing we can put in the trailer of all these guys fighting Doomsday. And it's like... And then it looks like crap. The CG's whack. There's no, like, fights shouldn't just be fights. You need plot importance with the fights, right? And so it's like there's a whole bunch of plot importance that's put onto the Batman versus Superman fight, but then there's just all this big CGI bull crap, you know. At least WandaVision kind of used their big stupid fight of everyone looking. It looks like you're watching female Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, and, it really does.
The only reason it kind of works is because there was some plot thing happening. You know, Agatha taught her about the runes, and so that was a plant, and then we had a payoff where she does the runes inside the thing. Okay, like, that's kind of cute, but I do wish that we just got to avoid the whole big stupid, they just go up and fly in the sky and shoot fireballs at each other. Like, just how stupid is that? I'm so sick of looking at that. It wasn't interesting the first time, and that was 20 years ago, you know, and I'm still seeing it today. Like, this is still how we do things. Like, God, and man. And then the Vision stuff was so worthless. The whole, like, setup for
it. I did not mind the Vision stuff. I'm happy that it at least I did not like how the Vision stuff ended, but I enjoyed the fact that they decided to end their big fight. Instead of having just, like, more fighting, they ended it with a philosophical discussion. That seemed
so I do
Vision.
Appreciate,
but then the way that he ends
that.
it, I hated how they ended it by just like, oh, I'm just going to transfer my everything that I've gone through into you, and then you just get to go fly off in somewhere, and then we don't see you for the rest of the episode.
Right, which makes you just go like, God, that guy didn't impact the story like at all, except to, you know, he kind of feels like is almost like how the Mandalorian is like, hey, we've got, you know, Boba Fett almost just so that we can give him his own spinoff. You know, he's not that plot important. And so you have the same thing with this White Vision where it's like, oh no, big setup, this is going to be a big problem. And then it's kind of, he's only there just so that we can know, like, again, if you're not, I don't know, I don't want to make too hot of a take on this in case I do end up being wrong and look like a jerk, but it feels like every sign points to Vision's coming back in the form of that guy. And he literally at the end says, I'm Vision. So Wanda's all like, oh no, Vision's dead. Oh, it's so sad, you know, but the odds are we'll probably say hello again. Yeah, of course you're going to say hello again. He's literally out there. Like, if I was the Vision in her head, I would be like, yeah, no, he's there. I gave him all my memories. And so for all intents and purposes, he's literally me. So he's cool. Just go find that guy.
Which is a big problem. It reminds me a lot of my biggest problem with Avengers Endgame when you have a character like Thanos that I really, really want to see all, like, how he is reacting to everything that's happened after Infinity War. And then 10 minutes in, they kill him and replace him with the 2014 sassy block of purple wood that simply, he knows everything that's happened, but he has not experienced everything that's happened. And so there's like such... It reminds me, there's this line from Wanda in the final battle of Endgame where it highlights the entire problem, and they don't even realize it when they're writing it, when he says, you took everything from me, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, this is the problem.
So, okay, so yeah, let's put a button on this WandaVision discussion. They you know, I don't know. It's like, okay, so they're obviously doing a spinoff for Rambo. She's probably going to get a movie.
I think she's gonna. I think they were trying to tie in Captain Marvel 2.
They are.
Which is like...
Oh, you're right. Okay, so instead of her standalone, it'll probably just be the next Captain Marvel movie. That's a good point.
Because that's the daughter of the woman from Captain
I
Marvel
don't remember her
1.
name, but yeah, exactly right. She's the little girl.
Yeah, she's the little girl that's all grown up.
And now she's going to be Photon.
Yeah, which is like, I did really, really love the scene with her kind of warping.
I did too.
That was really, really cool, but it kind of...
Yeah, I was on shrooms and I was like, whoa.
Well, and that's another big problem. That reminds me of how worthless of a villain Hayward was. Where he's just like, I'm just going to kill these children now for some reason. Like,
and then he's like missing.
Like, it's
like
so dumb.
That first shot when he tries to shoot the kids is like the first and second shot were like absolutely going between the two kids. So whatever.
Yeah.
No, he really is. He's there just to be generic, like, you know, military bad guy. Which is kind of funny because it's also like everything else is so it's like, well, you know, this is the good part of the military and that's the bad part of the military. So they're not even really making a statement, even though they're trying to like feel like they're making a statement.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I mean with Marvel in general. That's all the problems, right? They want to make statements without having to actually make statements. So everything is like, oh no, someone died. Look at the cost. Oh, never mind. They're not really dead. Oh, look, the military's bad. Oh, never mind. It's actually just this bad apple in the military. It's like, well, you guys aren't saying anything.
I think that's
but you keep
problem.
Talking.
Is that they do
well,
not
I think it is if you try
to
come across. Yeah, that's why I would prefer something like a Ragnarok, where it's just kind of like, it's just fun, dude. Like, just enjoy the pretty colors, have fun.
Yeah, and even that film has a great example of actually kind of that's a great example of a film that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that almost kind of actually takes things to task, especially with like how it's like, oh yeah, like this gigantic city Asgard, like it actually is like built off the backs of just enslaving entire like populations.
Yeah, good point. True.
Which is like, that's a great example of like, okay, you're actually trying to do something here.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know, it's totally fair, right? Where they just kind of don't land for me with WandaVision. And the thing that's the most frustrating is I think that there is a very, very, very good story in WandaVision of the idea that Wanda Maximoff, like, we have this, like, we're humans, we're fallible, right? You end up in situations where you have so much grief that you become selfish and you don't care and think about other people's well-being. And you end up making really terrible decisions that you on the Tuesday last week wouldn't have made, but you've made it now. And now there's consequences to that, right? And they just are completely devoid of consequences at this point. We already know that she's going to be out there with, you know, Doctor Strange hanging out in the multiverse, probably because she's hunted on Earth or something like that. But like I said, it's not that everyone on Earth in the show said that she's a good guy, but it's that the show was trying to tell me, no, you're supposed to still like her. And it's like, no, screw that. Like, you know, I think the show should have ended.
It removes the moral ambiguity.
It really does. Well, or it creates some where there shouldn't be any.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, there was, I think that the way I wanted the show to end was again, if there was no Agatha at all, I would have had it set up where ultimately Vision ends up realizing what's going on. And then he ends up having to have this big, like, tearful, you know, talk with Wanda, holding her face, saying like, look, you have to let me and the kids go. Like, this is wrong. You know, it's wrong. And she agrees and realizes that he's right. And then she lets it all go, you know, and like that should have been kind of the ending. But instead it just kind of becomes like, I don't know, it just all is about between her and Agatha and her becoming the Scarlet Witch. I don't care if anyone calls her the Scarlet Witch. They dropped that like it was supposed to be this huge bomb. And it was like, yeah, whatever.
That just seemed so dumb because it's like, you're the Scarlet Witch. It's like, that was literally what you called her in Age of Ultron. Like, what's the big difference now? Like, you have a different
guess they
costume?
technically. So I looked it up. Apparently they didn't. I guess no one has actually called her that until then. But you see, that's what I'm saying. You didn't know and I didn't know because it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah, there's no big. Yeah, there's no meaning behind it. It's just another thing, and it's like. It feels almost like
they're acting like they just dropped this huge bomb that's supposed to, you know, it's like just it was nothing. Oh, okay, whatever.
And it's also weird.
We all know she's Scarlet Witch. All of us have been calling her Scarlet Witch for like what 8 years or something.
Yeah, the actress was calling her Scarlet Witch in interviews when like the movie came out.
Right. No one was confused on who she was, you know. So it's like it's just I don't know. So that's kind of my thoughts about WandaVision. Is like it started off really strong, but it just kind of turned pretty generic and it became relatively standard fare. Yeah. I'm glad that they started off really strong because if they had flipped it, I probably wouldn't have made it to the good episodes.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I'm hoping it's painting my ideas of what the other shows possibly will be like because I'm also very curious. The next one I'm the most excited for is the Loki show.
Oh yeah, same here. That one seems like it's actually going to kind of be, I guess, more in vein with like Ragnarok and Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's taking itself a lot less seriously. And it's kind of just almost like he's going to just like different like planets and kind of like almost like a Rick and Morty style adventure, which would make sense because it's the same
Rick and Morty
writers.
are like Quantum Leap.
Yeah, exactly, because it's also they're also taking writers from Rick and Morty to be on to the Loki show, which would make sense.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, right. So I'm just hoping that it stays weird because it's another one that looked really weird. The one that looks the most pedestrian to me already is the Captain America Falcon one. And so I'm really worried about that one because I'm like, if all the shows start off interesting and then start shedding their interestingness to become more generic, that's the one that already looks pretty generic to start.
Yeah, and
that's
think
a big concern.
For right now, the only thing that I'm really actually like somewhat excited about Falcon and the Winter Soldier for is apparently it's the first show to get a 16 in the Netherlands, which is equivalent to a rated R in America. And apparently, according to people who've seen like some clips from it, like there was like a Disney showed like two 8-minute long scenes from like I guess it was like the first episode, and apparently it's more bloody than anything else in the MCU so far. So maybe it might actually be a bit more gritty, but also it has the same problem of it still looks so boringly color graded and so just like bleh. And like WandaVision, I think the thing that WandaVision did do very well at the end is it's overall a very well shot show. It's it really, when it's trying to stick to the idea of emulating those TV shows, it really does that very well. I think most of the acting is really great overall, especially Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen. I think they both do a really great job, even when they have some subpar material here and there.
Yeah, Elizabeth Olsen really did. This is probably one of the better things I've seen her in.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that she really carried a lot of the show on her back.
And I've never seen Paul Bettany. Like he's in garbage movies and he's always good.
That's the thing is like Paul Bettany is really, really talented, and I'm happy that he finally got something to really show off his abilities.
Yeah, me too. Well, not even just show off his abilities. I'm just glad he's getting paid.
Oh yeah, exactly.
He's been in all of these kind of like, He
was in Legion, not the FX show, but like that really terrible that one. Oh, yeah. He was in Solo. He was in Solo, a Star Wars story as the villain. That wasn't really the villain.
Yep, exactly. But most of us met him in A Knight's Tale, and he's incredible in that. But he wasn't becoming like a multimillionaire because of that or anything. So I was glad that these movies are kind of schlocky, but at least I lied. My introduction to him was A Beautiful Mind.
Mine was Master and Commander of the Far Side of the World. And he's great in that.
No, totally right. No, he's incredible. Well, that's what I'm saying. He's even good in the bad movies. Like, Inkheart is terrible, and he's great in it.
Yeah, he doesn't, he's a director-dependent actor. He's a director-independent actor. He can kind of
I totally disagree. Exactly. I agree with you. He is. I agree. I think he just brings it. And he knows how to commit in a way to, like, even if it's dumb, it's like, okay, well, I'm still going to give it my all. And so I really respect that. And so I'm just glad that he's, like, seeing paychecks now. He's like, he's one of the Marvel, I'm Vision, or Vision. So those are my thoughts on WandaVision for the most part. I mean, unless I go into more nitty gritty stuff.
I guess overall
it's like a step in the right direction.
7 out of 10 in my opinion, I guess, if I was going to try to give it a rating overall.
Man, that's a hard one for me. I probably
because the first 3 episodes I'd give like a 9, and then episode 5 I'd also give a 9, but then episodes 4, 6, 8, and 9 I'd probably give like, other than like episode 9 I'd give like a 6 out of 10, and then the other ones I'd give like a 7.
I would have to think about what I'm comparing it to, because the problem is I would also give almost all of the other movies like 5s and 4s.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's the thing is
because I'm already not a fan of the stuff that it's connected to.
Me neither. The only one I've given like a really positive rating would be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. That's the only one I've given that's like above a 7 out of 10 so far.
Yeah, that's fair, right? So I mean, I'm probably like a 6 or 7 or something like that. It's also hard too because like you often are left with the last taste that was in your mouth,
and it's not a great taste to be with.
It's not, so it's difficult because it's kind of like the last couple episodes just kind of shit the bed for me, and so then I'm kind of left with that feeling. Where if I had watched it in reverse, maybe it would be like, okay, it started off kind of tough, but it got real good.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I said, I'm not sure I would have even made it that far if it did start off. If the quality of the first episode was the quality of the last episode, I don't know if I would have made it to the second episode.
I don't think anyone other than like really big Marvel fanboys would really have gotten past if the show's quality was reversed, people would not have gotten to the end.
See, I don't know if I agree with that because I think those movies are freaking huge. It's that
they
feeling
really
of
are,
like,
yeah.
If I look around my friend circle, nobody likes Justin Bieber, but the guy sells out shows. So there's huge amounts of people that are into that stuff.
It reminded me of like, it kind of, by the end of it almost started reminding me of like, I feel like the reception of like the ending of it reminded me a lot to like Ant-Man. Like
Oh,
that kind
okay.
of like mid-tier Marvel when people saw it, but then no one really talked about it. Like if the whole
But it's
episode,
impressive for a
yeah,
TV show.
it's a very impressive show for a TV show because like the whole budget overall is like I think it's like $225 million, and
Oh, wow. Okay.
each episode had like a $25 million budget, which is like you
No,
can
but I mean
definitely
that kind.
see
I
that
meant that
production value.
reception.
Oh yeah, and the
I meant that.
reception
That
was really great
well, but
for the
you're saying
first
that like you
part.
feel like by the end it had the reception of like an Ant-Man, and I'm saying that that reception I think is impressive for it being like one of the TV show
Oh yeah,
spinoffs that's in
absolutely.
Disney
Because
Plus.
like those kind of
It's
because
not a
yeah,
huge movie.
it's not huge, but it's like it's something that feels like it has the production value of those other things.
Yeah, and like I said, like I think that no matter what I like or don't like about it, no one can say that they completely didn't care.
Oh, absolutely. Like I
I think
care.
there was
I'm
definitely
s-
care. Well,
I'm
no, I mean the
dis-
makers.
Oh yeah, of course. They
Like
really were putting in
you
the
can't
most.
some of those movies. I have the feeling that there's a bunch of like jobbers who are just kind of showing up and like, look, it's in focus. I'm shooting at the action. Whatever. We made the most generic kind of music we can. Here it is. Blah blah blah. And with this one, it's like no, people cared.
A
I just
lot.
feel like they probably had their hands tied a little bit and were forced to. It's like every time you want to make a Star Wars movie, it's like, okay, you have to have some kind of Death Star, you have to have TIE fighters, you have to have X-Wings, you have to have people from the Skywalker family. So by the time you actually get to where you get to be creative, you're like, well, God, I have so many things I have to fit into it. And that's kind of what it feels like, is that instead of having those things mixed all throughout every episode, it just kind of became more and more and more standard fare as the show went on.
Absolutely.
And so that's the part that kind of, is
'Cause
like,
yeah.
I still think they cared at the end, but they just had to fit all these really lame
They
things
did,
into
yeah.
there.
And the things I love about the show are like my favorite things in any Marvel thing. But the
Yeah.
things that don't work, like bring it down to a point where I would definitely rewatch. I'd rewatch the show for sure, but I don't know if
Yeah, I
I
might.
would rewatch it without skipping certain episodes.
Yeah, that too. Right, for sure. Or just ending early.
Yeah, exactly.
If it all ended on Agatha all along and that was the last episode, that would have been a baller movie.
Oh yeah, that would have been great. Like that would have been fantastic.
Ooh, what happens next? Yeah. But so yeah, man. So here's to hoping that the other shows don't aren't a step down from here, because at this point now, with how the last couple episodes made me feel, especially, or honestly the last half of the season made me feel, it's kind of the new floor for me.
Yeah.
And so if anything's worse than that, it's going to get probably just like a not good rating from me. And so I'm hoping that everything from here at least can match this and then hopefully elevate.
Oh yeah, that's
and I'll
hoping.
probably give Winter Soldier a shot, but that was one of the ones that I actually had no intention of even watching, because I was like, it's just another action adventure. I'm so sick of action adventure from these guys. I
Same
want to see
here.
more
Like,
mysteries.
I'll
I want to see
try it.
more thrillers. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. But I'm just like, man, if I see just like things just exploding, like I'm just numb to it, It's like, it reminds
so
me of like,
uninteresting at this point when that
well, it's the
happens.
new zombies, man. It's like everyone got so sick of looking at zombies after a while. And so that's how I feel here, where I'm just like, I'm so sick of watching guys fly around and shoot missiles, and it doesn't matter because everything's G-rated, so no one dies and people barely get hurt. It's just like, ugh, I just don't care.
And I think that's probably the biggest reason why I'm the one at this point in any upcoming Marvel thing. The thing I'm the most excited for at this point would be the Eternals from Chloe Zhao, because apparently the entire, like, at least, like, I think it's like 80 to 90% of the action is all being shot on location with practical effects with, like, incredibly wide-angle lenses, and they're trying to model kind of some of the action scenes off of, like, The Revenant as inspiration.
Oh, how cool.
That sounds really great to me, and that sounds like Marvel actually taking some sort of risk again, which I would really like for that to turn out well, because I also really, really loved Nomadland and the writer from Chloe Zhao.
It's so funny. I just Googled the Eternals and it's got the genre action fantasy.
Yeah, because I think it seems like something interesting, and it seems like something that is at least taking some sort of risk.
Well, and it's a heck of a cast they've got,
It definitely is, yeah.
Not that all those people haven't been in terrible movies before, but the hope is that it's because they were attracted to the material. These people all have plenty of money.
Yeah, because also, like, Kevin Feige apparently said, like, that the pitch that Chloe Zhao had for the Eternals is, like, the best pitch he's ever heard for a film, period. Which
Yeah, the problem is, though,
excited.
Feige's also responsible for all the crap I hate, so, like,
That's
his
true.
opinion's not the most impressive to me, but
I
fair enough.
very highly agree there, but it does feel as if it seems as if they're kind of proud that they took a risk, and that apparently, because, like, I don't know
risk.
I don't know how much this is true, but there's at least been a lot of reports saying that Marvel thinks that, like, they have, like, an absolute beast on their hands that's, like, the best thing they've ever made so far, which is, like,
Yeah, great.
that would be nice. I would really like for that to be the case.
Well, like I say, risk right now. I'm very pro risk with Marvel because I think
Agreed.
Marvel and Disney play it so safe,
They
and I
really
think
do,
that
and I'd love
Disney.
for them to go much harder
It's
in
why,
terms of creativity.
yeah, it's why a lot of the Disney movies, like Raya, The Last Dragon, the main complaint is that it's just like, yep, I've seen it, man. You guys do the same thing over and over. Your animation keeps getting better and better, but like people aren't impressed by good animation anymore.
Their writing has not improved in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it feels like by design. It's like, look, we have a formula that works, just keep doing it, and when it stops working, then I guess we'll have to think about doing something different. And I feel like Marvel is finally starting to get there because it's like, you're just going to start losing people. After a while, everyone's going to be like, okay, bro, we've seen it, man. I'm done. I'm checking out,
Yeah, so they have to start doing more things like the Multiverse of Madness is apparently going to be like a horror movie, which is like, it feels as if they're finally at a point in time where they have to start making these risks by design because they know at this point that if they do not continue to do more things, like for the first while they have a grace period of like people will continue to watch these things, but if they do not continue to become more interesting or different in quality, then they're not going to really continue to increase their fan base. They're only going to have who they have right now, and it's going to dwindle down as farther they go.
And I think they have to try to grow that fan base. And really it's going to take more than just hiring Angelina Jolie. They really have to actually, they're going to have to do something to break into like other genres because there's plenty of people who have never seen any of the, Avengers movies. Because it's just not, they're like, I just don't like comic book movies. And that's the problem is that comic book movies currently means a certain genre. And I think they need to transcend that so that comic book movie doesn't mean anything. The same way anime doesn't mean anything. It's like, that's just a medium. Superhero movie, comic book movie should just mean movie that has superheroes and whatever in it and comic book things in it, but it could be any genre, and when they get to that place, then it could start. Now the weird, horrific dystopian future that could create is that if you want to get some kind of high concept cool thing made, it has to have, superhero in it. So it's if you want to do Quantum Leap again, you have to have Loki. That could be kind of lame, but it's better than not having them,
Exactly.
And so I don't know. We'll see what happens. I still think it's a bubble. I think it will burst at some point.
Oh, definitely.
But I still think we have some time, and I think that things like WandaVision are a step in the right direction to keeping that, staving that off for a little longer.
Definitely.
So, all right, man. I had a lot of fun talking about this, and that's it. I have no idea how to sign off on something like this, so I'll just tell everyone bye.
Yep.